Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. We have a super fun video today because it is April 10th, and as some of you may or may not know, April 10th is National Siblings Day. I myself have three older siblings. I'm the youngest of four, and so coming from a big family, I love my siblings. We all got along really well growing up, and siblings, I mean, they're my best friends. They make me happy. So when I found out that April 10th was National Siblings Day, I decided to do a book recommendation video for books that feature siblings. And, I'm going to be honest with you, we have a lot of books for today's video. When I first got the idea to do this video, I was like, I'm probably not going to find that many. But going through my bookcase, I think I pulled like half the books off my bookcase because I was like, oh yeah, there's siblings here, there's siblings here. And I put some back, and I have a lot here and have a lot of books from my Kindle that I want to talk about. And so, yeah, we have a lot of books to talk about today. But some of them are series. A lot of them are series, so hopefully it'll go pretty quickly. I tried to stick with books where there was a lot of interaction from the siblings with each other. So, like, for example, Lori Wick's Yellow Rose trilogy. I mean, each book follows a Rawlings brother in that series. And they do interact with each other for like a few chapters in each book, but I think the bulk of it happens when they're away from each other. So it is, it is about the siblings, but I mean, they're separated a lot in the books, so like that series won't be on here and things like that. So I tried to stick with books where they really interacted with each other a lot. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started because we have a lot of books to talk about today. So I just have these piled around here. So we have no particular order. I guess let's start with the ones that I don't have in print. So the Dakota Treasures series by Lorraine Snelling. This is actually the first series that I thought of to talk about when I got the idea for this video. The Dakota Treasures series, it's 4 books, and they are Ruby, Pearl, Opal, and Amethyst. And they follow 4 different main characters. However, Ruby and Opal are sisters, and we meet them in the very first book. Ruby is an adult, and Opal is only, I think, like 8 to 10 at the time. Ruby is her guardian because their mother died, and their father has been off on the frontier for a long time. And so at the beginning of the novel, she gets this telegram saying that her father's really sick and he wants his daughters to come, so she packs them up. And she and Opal head to either North Dakota or South Dakota. It's Dakota Territory. They're not states yet. But I forget where it is specifically. But it's in the Dakotas. And so she arrives there just as her father is dying, and he leaves her ownership of what's basically a saloon and brothel, which she's like, no, I'm not raising my little sister in this environment. So she decides to turn it into a hotel instead. And so we really follow them throughout the series, even though there are like different heroines in each book. For example, Pearl, which is the second book, Pearl is the school teacher that comes to the Dakota Territories to teach, and she lives at the hotel with Ruby and Opal. So even though there are different heroines, we're still following Ruby and Opal specifically. They're main characters in all 4 of the books, and in the third book, which is Opal's book, she's about 14 years old, so we really get to see her transition from childhood to adulthood. And then in the final book, Amethyst, in which we're following a character named Amethyst who has come to the town, we're also getting Opal's point of view as she really reaches adulthood and has a romance of her own. So she has a romance in that 4th book as well. So yeah, that's a series that I really wanted to mention today because not a lot of... we have siblings in a lot of series, especially in Christian fiction, but we don't always get to see the children in the beginning books grow up to become adults with their own romances in the later books, and we do in this series, so that makes it really nice and kind of unique. So I would definitely recommend that series. So next we have the Hawthorne House series by Christiane Hunter. Many of you know this series. The first book in the series is A Noble Masquerade. And each of the books in this series follows a different Hawthorne sibling. Is that their last name or is that their title? Because her brother's a duke. It's Hawthorne is either their last name or it's his nobility title. I don't remember. But I think it's their last name. But anyway, each book follows a different sibling in the series, and they have a lot of interaction. It's very funny. A Noble Masquerade is my favorite Christine Hunter book, and it's one of my go-tos when I need good humor. I mean, Christine Hunter in general is one of my go-tos when I need good, solid humor. So I would definitely recommend The Hawthorne House because they each follow a different sibling, and there's a lot of sibling interaction, and it makes it really fun. The next series I have is the Muir Harbor series by Melissa Tagg. This one is fun because each book follows a different sibling, but they are adopted siblings, so you have that dynamic going on. We don't see that a whole lot, especially not in historical fiction, although a little bit. It might be a little more prevalent in modern contemporary fiction. But we get to see the different siblings in the Muir Harbor book. They are the Muir siblings. And there's also a little bit of mystery going on with a granddaughter who has been missing for like 30 years. So there's that. I would recommend it. I really enjoyed that series. Okay. So next, we have another Lorraine Snelling series, which is the Leia's Garden series. I'm holding up the third book in the series, which is Fields of Bounty. This is Lorraine Snelling's, I think, her most modern series. Her most recently published, I mean. It follows four sisters as they head west on the Oregon Trail to set up a new life on the frontier where they farm and homestead and start a garden business. And so each book follows a different sister, but as they're living together and going on the Oregon Trail, there's a lot of sibling interaction. So that makes this series a really good one for this list. So there's that. They're really good. I have a lot of Rosanna and White books on this list. It's actually quite interesting because, as I was going through my bookshelf looking for siblings books, I realized that most of Rosanna and White books have, siblings. I mean, at least a lot of them do. I feel like I pulled most of them off, but I put a little bit back. A couple of them back. At least one back. I don't know. Anyway, so I have the Secrets of the Isle series, which is The Nature of a Lady, To Treasure an Heiress, and Worthy of Legend. I picked this series because the heroine of the first book, Libby, she has a brother whose name is Bram. He is the hero of the third book. And even though Bram doesn't really show up until the final third of the first book, his presence is definitely felt because Libby is constantly talking about him. He is a big presence in her life and he has a lot of sway in her decisions. So as she's on the island having vacation, falling in love and things, she is thinking about him and talking about him constantly and how he'll react to her decisions and things like that. And then he shows up in the final third of the first book, and then we see him as a prevalent character along with her throughout the second and third book. He is actually the hero of the third book. So even though he's not present for most of the first book, I feel like his presence is mentioned enough that there's a lot of interaction there. So that's why I put those on the list. Also, they're really good. Worthy of Legend is my favorite Rosanna and White book. I love it. We also have the first book in the Imposter series by Rosanna and White, which is A Beautiful Disguise. The Imposter series follows Marigold and her brother. Wow, her brother's name just bloop out of my mind. I really like him. Yates. His name is Yates. It follows them as they are broke aristocrats, and they start a private investigation firm where they investigate fellow aristocrats for clients anonymously. So there's a lot of interaction between Yates and Marigold in this first book. In the second book, which just came out this year, the second book focuses more on their partners. And so Yates and Marigold are big parts of the book, but they don't necessarily interact with each other all that much. So I didn't put that on here. But the third book is going to be about Yates, so I imagine he will have much more interactions with his sister in the third book. All right, let's head over to some contemporary fiction for a little bit and talk about Lizzie and Jane by Catherine Ray. So this is a more serious sibling relationship in the fact that Lizzie and Jane are sisters, and Jane has cancer, and Lizzie has been living away from home for a while, but she moves back to their hometown to help Jane and her family as Jane goes through cancer treatment. I think Jane and Lizzie, it's been a long time since I read this book, but I believe they were a bit estranged before Jane's cancer diagnosis. So they have a lot of healing to do and hashing out of issues when Lizzie comes back to help out. So it's a little bit more on the serious side, but it is an interesting sibling dynamic, if that's what you want to read. Okay. So we have A Place Called Home by Lori Wick. This is the first book in the Place Called Home series. And actually, the entire Place Called Home series follows, I want to say the Camden family. That's not right, though. It follows a family. And so all of the books in the series follow this family. Maybe it's Cameron. Not Camden. It's the Cameron family. Thank you. Had to look. So all of the books follow this family and different siblings from this family as they find love. But this first book, A Place Called Home, is especially filled with siblings because the main character of this book is a twin. And so Christine, she is fleeing from a dangerous situation, and she gets robbed in the town of Baxter and taken in by the local doctor. And the doctor's twin is the main guy in this series, and so they have kind of a meet cute when she meets him because she assumes that he's his brother. And yeah, I won't go into all the details, but it's cute. But yeah, so because they're twins, their sibling relationship is a lot more prominent in this book, but honestly, in the entire A Place Called Home series, all the siblings are really prevalent because it's about the family. So there's that. Next we have another Rosanna in White series. I think this is the last one. Yeah, this is the last Rosanna in White that we're talking about. And that is the Shadows Over England series, which is A Name Unknown, A Song Unheard, and An Hour Unspent. And I also went ahead and I threw in the first book of the Codebreaker series, A Number of Love, because Margot, who is the main character of this, is connected to the previous series, and I will explain. So the Shadows Over England series, it follows a group of young sibling thieves. When they were kids, they were all orphaned kind of separately as kids for different reasons, and they became street urchins, but they found each other and formed a kind of found family. And they, growing up, they kind of stole for their food and to make a life for themselves. And now that they're adults and they're really good thieves, they are recruited by the government during World War I to kind of steal for the government, whether it be information or things from, say, an enemy's embassy, things like that. So when they were young, they stole to survive, and now they steal for the government and the war effort. So it's a really interesting and fun series. So there's not as much sibling interaction in these books as there is in other books, especially in A Name Unknown. In A Name Unknown, our main character, Rosemary, is actually sent to the country on assignment. So we get interaction with her siblings at the beginning and the end, but it's not as much in the middle. But in A Song Unheard and An Hour Unspent, we have a lot more sibling interaction. The main girl in the song Unheard, Willa, she has a lot of interaction with her brother Barkley. He's kind of a partner for her in her mission in this one, and Barkley is the hero of An Hour Unspent. And honestly, even though there's a little bit of less sibling dynamics in this series as in other books, I had to include it because I absolutely love the sibling dynamics in this book, even if we have a little bit less of them. Like, the sibling relationships are just awesome in this book. And then I also included A Number in Love, and this, technically it's a different series, but the main heroine, Margot, is the younger sister of the main hero, Lucas from A Song Unheard. So there is that connection. Okay. We're not done. There are a lot of books to talk about. So next we have another Lori Wick book, which is called The Visitor. And this is the third book in the English Garden series. This is like a double storyline. We're actually following, the main storyline is with Cassie, but there is also a secondary storyline in this book about her sister Lizzie. And actually, I have to admit, I like Lizzie's storyline better than Cassie's, even though it's definitely a secondary storyline and it gets quite a bit less page time. I love Lizzie's storyline, and I wish it had been the main storyline. But yes, so there are, I think, 4 siblings, but they're not all home. Cassie and Lizzie and their oldest brother, I think, are the only ones home for most of the books. But then their 4th brother comes home. He has his own book. Like, the 4th book is all about him, and he comes home in that book. So they have also more sibling interaction in that book. But anyway, I didn't explain that well. But yes, this book, it deals with both sisters as well as their oldest brother, and they have really great sibling dynamics in this book, so it's definitely a recommendation. Okay, let me take a drink. So next we have Short Straw Bride by Karen Whitemeyer. This is technically the first book in the Archer Brothers series, I think. But it's also kind of a standalone because no, it's not, because Stealing the Preacher is a full book. The youngest brother has a novella, but Stealing the Preacher is a full book, and that's about Crockett. So yeah, anyway, it's the first book in the Archer Brothers series. They all follow the brothers. This one has the most sibling interaction because all 4 brothers are living at home during this book. So our main heroine, Mary, she overhears a plot from the man that her aunt and uncle are trying to get her to marry. She does not want to marry him, but they're trying to arrange it. She overhears him plotting to burn the Archers out of their farm so that he can buy it at a really low price. So she goes to their farm to warn them. She ends up getting injured and has to stay overnight, which ruins her reputation. And so her uncle demands that one of the Archer brothers marries her to save her reputation. She ends up marrying the oldest brother, Travis, and things take off from there. But all 4 Archer brothers are living at home during this book. Later on, in like Stealing the Preacher, which is the next book, and then in Neil's novella, I forget what it's called, they're kind of taking off on their own paths, so they don't have as much sibling interaction. But in this one, since they're all living at home, there's a lot of sibling interaction, and that includes a lot of teasing and ribbing and also protective instincts with each other. So it's a really interesting dynamic. Okay, another Lori Wick book, which is Whatever Tomorrow Brings. This is the first book in the Californian series. And the main girl in this series, she has charge of her younger siblings after her mother dies, and her father he goes back to Hawaii, where they've been missionaries their whole lives, to collect their belongings. So he is not in the picture. So Caitlin, that's her name, she has custody of her younger brother Sean and her younger sister Markale. And so that's a very big storyline in this book. And Sean and Markale have their own stories later in the series, but in those stories, they're not at home. They're off on their own, so they don't have a lot of sibling interaction in their own books. But in this one, because they're young wards of their sister, there is a lot of sibling interaction. And it's interesting sibling interaction because, like the Dakota Treasure series, the oldest sibling is a guardian to the younger sibling. So it's got both sibling interaction and like almost a parental figure interaction. So that gives it an interesting dynamic. Almost done. Almost done. Okay. So another Karen Whitemeyer book with a lot of great sibling interaction is More Than Meets the Eye. So this one is another kind of adoption / found family type thing. So there are 3 kids who are on an orphan train at the beginning of the novel. Our main heroine, Evangeline, is one of them, but the train crashes, and so Evangeline and the 2 little boys, Seth and Zach, they decide, after the train crash, they decide to take off on their own and kind of become a family. And so they grow up together as siblings, taking care of each other and just surviving, and yeah. And then our main hero, Logan, comes. He has some kind of beef with the oldest brother, Zach, but he meets Evangeline in the woods, and she doesn't know like who he is or what he's about. So there's that dynamic going on. But they have a really interesting sibling dynamic, especially because Seth has asthma, and this is historical fiction, so they're not really aware of the condition and what it's all about. And so Evangeline and Zach are really trying, to take care of him, and Seth has an interesting routine as he takes care of himself. And so, yeah, having one of the characters with asthma, especially in a historical setting, gives it a really interesting dynamic with those siblings. So that's More Than Meets the Eye. Okay, just 3 more things to talk about. I'm almost done. I really am. So then we have I don't think this series has a name. I guess the Edgewood Siblings series, which we have Authentically Izzy, Positively Penelope, and Loyally Luke. And these are all Pepper Basham books. Loyally Luke technically does not come out till May, which is next month. But let me tell you guys, I got an arc of it that I read, I think, in February. And it's going to be amazing. If y'all have not pre-ordered yet, you should pre-order it because it's fantastic. Definitely. But yes, these follow the Edgewood siblings. Technically, Izzy is their cousin, but her parents died when she was a child, maybe an early teen. I don't know what age she was, but she was young, and so she was raised in the Edgewood house with her cousins, Penelope, Luke, and Jeanette? Something that starts with a J. Anyway, and so she's practically a sibling, and I count her as sibling, so I'm counting her for this video. But they all each have their own series, and the great thing about this one is being contemporary fiction, excuse me, is that they have texts and emails. So even though they're not in the same spot, there is a lot of interaction because, these books are hybrid epistolary novels, and by that I mean they're written partially in emails and text and partially in regular writing. I don't even know the term for it. And so because they're partially epistolary, there's a lot of messages flying back and forth between the Edgewood siblings, which adds a whole new level to these novels that makes it really, really great. I love the sibling dynamics in these novels, and these are, definite recommendation for good sibling vibes. Okay, another Karen Whitemeyer. I had a lot of Karen Whitemeyers. A lot of Karen Whitemeyers and a lot of Rosanna M. Whites. I don't know. This is If the Boot Fits, which just came out, and I just finished reading it. Did I read it last month and talk about it in my March wrap-up, or did I just finish it at the beginning of this month? I think I read it in March, and I talked about it in my March wrap-up. Anyway, I just finished this book a couple weeks ago. But this is an interesting one because both of our main characters, Samantha and Asher, both have younger brothers, and their younger brothers are around the same age. They both have 12-year-old brothers, and then Asher also has a younger brother. He has 2 brothers. But it makes it really interesting because their kind of protective and older sibling dynamics with their younger siblings becomes a big plot point, both in the main plot and also in how they relate to each other, because one of the things that draws them to each other is their treatment of their younger siblings. And so it makes a really, really interesting dynamic. And it's not the main part of this novel, but it adds an interesting layer. And it does affect the main plot as well. So yes, that's a good one. All right, we've made it to the final series, guys. And I know I've probably been talking way too fast, but I do that. So the last series we're going to talk about is Tracy Peterson's Brides of Gallatin County series. We have A Promise to Believe In, A Love to Last Forever, and A Dream to Call My Own. Each of these books follows a different sister. Their last name is actually Gallatin. So they live in Gallatin County and their last name is Gallatin. Probably because their boarding house was like the first thing that kind of colonized the county. Anyway, so the three sisters run a boarding house together, and so there is a lot of interaction going on there. They stick their noses in each other's business a lot, which makes it really interesting and adds a fun layer to each of their own romances. So yeah, that's what I gotta say about that. Yeah, so many books. I thought, like, when I came up with this idea, I was like, man, I'm gonna have trouble finding books with good sibling dynamics to talk about, but I did not. I had to leave a lot of books on the shelf for this one. There are a lot of books that talk about siblings. So yeah. But that's what I have for this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what your favorite sibling dynamics in books are. What books do you like to read with siblings? If you don't really care or notice when siblings are present. And if you've read any of these books. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you join me again soon.